The soapsuds had turned cold an hour ago. Rose Whitfield stood at the kitchen sink of the Park family estate in Bergen County, New Jersey, her 48-year-old hands submerged in gray water that smelled like old kimchi and cooking oil. Behind her, through the archway, she could hear them laughing. Her husband, Marcus, his mother, Yolanda, his sister, Denise. Their voices bounced off the marble floors of a house Rose had helped pay for, with 14 years of double shifts as a pediatric nurse at Hackensack Memorial. 63 plates. She had counted them. 63 plates from a dinner party celebrating Marcus's promotion at the accounting firm. A promotion Rose had funded when she cashed out her retirement to cover his MBA. Not one guest had offered to help. Not one family member had thanked her. When Yolanda had swept past her 20 minutes ago, she had simply said, "Make sure you dry them with the good cloth this time, sweetheart. The linen ones, not the ones you use." The ones you use. As if Rose were the help. As if 14 years of marriage had earned her nothing but a designation as the woman who scrubbed grease off other people's china. Rose's back ached in the exact spot where a herniated disc had been screaming at her for 3 months. An injury she had gotten lifting a 200-pound patient during a code blue. An injury Marcus had told her to stop complaining about. Her wedding ring, loose from the weight she had lost since her sister Denise Ray had passed, clinked against the porcelain. Then the doorbell rang. She heard Yolanda's heels click across the foyer, heard the door open, heard a silence so complete it felt like the whole house had inhaled at once. "I'm looking for Mama Rose." The voice was low, quiet, and Korean accented, precise the way a scalpel is precise. Rose froze, her hands still in the dishwater. She didn't know that voice. She had never heard that voice in her life. "There's no Mama Rose here," Yolanda snapped. "You have the wrong house." "I don't." Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, expensive. Italian leather on Italian marble. Rose turned from the sink, water dripping from her elbows, and saw him for the first time. He was tall, mid-40s maybe. A charcoal 3-piece suit that fit him the way skin fits a body. Silver at his temples that looked deliberate rather than aged. Behind him, through the open front door, she saw 2 black Escalades idling in the circular drive, and 4 men in dark suits standing perfectly still on her lawn. His eyes found hers across the kitchen. They softened in a way that made her heart stop. "Mama Rose," he said, and his voice cracked on the second word. "I've been looking for you for 22 years. Marcus stood up from the dining table. "Who the hell are you? Get out of my house." The man in the suit didn't even glance at him. He walked past Yolanda, past Denise, past Marcus, straight into the kitchen where Rose stood with her hands full of dirty water. He stopped 3 feet from her, and for a long moment he just looked at her face like he was memorizing it. "My name is Ji-hoon Seo," he said quietly, "and you saved my life when I was 14 years old." Rose's knees buckled, but to understand how Rose Whitfield ended up here, dishpan hands trembling, a Korean Mafia boss weeping in her in-laws' kitchen. We need to go back. This story is for every woman who has ever been called strong as an excuse to give her less. For every woman who married into a family that made her audition for a love she should have been given freely. For every daughter who buried her own dreams so her husband could chase his. For every soul who has stood at a sink, at a stove, at a bedside, doing the invisible work that holds a whole family together, and been told she was lucky to be allowed to do it. If any of that lands somewhere tender in you, do me a favor right now. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell. And in the comments, tell me the city you're watching from, because I want to know exactly where in the world women are still being asked to shrink themselves to fit inside somebody else's idea of a wife. Because what happened to Rose Whitfield in the next 72 hours changed everything. Not just her marriage, not just her bank account, her whole understanding of what she had been worth all along, to people who had never bothered to look up from their plates and see her. The question at the heart of this story is simple, and it's going to sting. What do you owe the people who mistook your silence for consent? Stay with me. Because before Ji-hoon Seo walked through that door, Rose had spent a lifetime believing the lie that love was something you had to earn by disappearing. Rose Whitfield was born Rose Amara Boateng in Newark in 1978. the older of two daughters to a Ghanaian mother who cleaned offices at night, and a Black American father who drove a city bus for 31 years without missing a shift. Her mother, Comfort, used to say the same thing every morning as she braided Rose's hair before school. "You are somebody's answered prayer, baby. Don't ever forget that." Rose forgot. She forgot slowly, the way a room gets dark, one shade at a time until you don't remember what the light looked like. She was 17 when her father died of a heart attack behind the wheel of the number 39 bus. She was 19 when she started nursing school at Rutgers, working 3 jobs so her mother could keep the house on Bergen Street. She was 22 in her final rotation on a pediatric ward at what was then called St. Joseph's, when a 14-year-old Korean boy was brought in bleeding from a gunshot wound to the abdomen. No ID, no family, and no English she could understand. The boy was there for 11 days. His so-called uncle, a hard-faced man in a cheap suit who Rose now understood had been anything but family, never once came to visit. The staff had orders to discharge the boy to social services the moment he was medically cleared. Rose spent every off-shift on the floor next to his bed. She read to him from a Korean English children's dictionary she bought at the Salvation Army for $2. She snuck him bibimbap from the Korean market on Broad Street because he wouldn't touch the hospital food. She held his hand through night terrors. On the 11th morning, before the social workers arrived, she pressed a folded $20 bill and a paper with her mother's church address into his palm and told him, in the 6 Korean words she had learned, "Anywhere but here, you understand." He was gone before the paperwork cleared. She never knew his name. She thought about him for a year. Then she thought about him once a month. Then she stopped, because a girl named Rose met a man named Marcus Whitfield at a mutual friend's cookout in Irvington, and Marcus had the kind of smile that made her feel like the answered prayer her mother had promised she was. Marcus was an accountant. Not yet then. A bookkeeper working out of a strip mall in East Orange, wearing shirts that were a size too tight because he couldn't afford to replace them. Rose married him in the summer of 2005 in her mother's church, wearing a dress her Aunt Beryl had sewn from thrift store lace. Marcus's mother, Yolanda, refused to attend. Yolanda was from an old West Indian family in Teaneck that had, in her words, worked too hard to see her only son marry a plain Newark girl with no people. Rose told herself it would soften. Yolanda would come around. Marcus loved her. That was enough. 14 years later, Rose was working 60 hours a week in the pediatric ICU at Hackensack Memorial. She had put Marcus through his MBA at Rutgers Business School, the whole tuition, $47,000, cashed out of her 401k at a penalty she hadn't fully understood at the time. She had paid off his sister Denise's cosmetology school. She had co-signed a car loan for Yolanda after Yolanda's second divorce. She had, at Marcus's insistence, sold the house in Newark her mother had left her when Comfort died in 2013, and used the money, $162,000, as the down payment on the 6-bedroom colonial in Bergen County that Marcus's family called the Park Estate, because they refused to call anything Rose had touched by her own name. And in that house, Rose was the maid. That's not a metaphor. Yolanda had moved in 3 years earlier after her second divorce. Denise moved in 18 months after that, after her boyfriend put her out. Neither of them worked. Both of them expected breakfast in the mornings and dinner at night, and Marcus, who had once brought Rose flowers from a gas station because he couldn't afford a florist. Marcus told her that in his culture, the women of the house took care of the mother of the house. When Rose reminded him gently that his mother was healthy, 61, and could stand at a stove herself, he said, "You know she has her arthritis." Yolanda did not have arthritis. Rose's sister, Denise Ray, different Denise, her blood sister, her heart, had died of ovarian cancer in the spring of 2022. Rose had used her last 3 weeks of PTO to sit by her sister's bed in a hospice in Elizabeth. When she came back to Bergen County, she found that Yolanda had thrown out her mother's cast-iron skillet, the one Comfort had brought from Ghana in 1974, because it didn't match the new kitchen. Rose did not cry. She had stopped crying somewhere around year 11. She had discovered that if she didn't cry, Marcus didn't have to feel guilty, and if Marcus didn't feel guilty, the house was peaceful, and if the house was peaceful, she could get through the shift and come home and sleep. That was the whole architecture of her life by then. Not joy, not even survival, just peace management. Her hair had started to gray at the temples. Her hands, once beautiful, had cracked from hospital-grade soap and cold dishwater. She weighed 131 pounds, down from her healthy 148, because she'd gotten in the habit of eating whatever the family left on their plates, which was often nothing at all. She was 48 years old. And she believed in the deep, quiet marrow of herself, that this was what she deserved, because she had chosen it, because she had said yes, because her mother had raised her to be the kind of woman a family could lean on, and it had not occurred to Rose until much, much later that leaning on a woman is not the same thing as loving her. That was the lie. That love had to be earned by being useful. She would carry that lie all the way to the moment Ji-hoon Seo walked through her front door. 3 weeks before that dinner party, Rose met Ji-hoon for the first time, though she didn't know it was him yet, and she wouldn't know for another 18 days. It was a Tuesday in early October. Rose had worked a 14-hour shift and was walking to her car in the hospital parking garage when her tote bag split. Everything spilled. Her wallet, her lunch container, a book of Rumi poems she read in the break room because it was the only thing that made her feel like a person. She was on her knees on the concrete, scooping up scattered receipts, when a shadow fell over her. A man had knelt down across from her, charcoal suit, silver at the temples, hands too clean for a man who was picking things up off a parking garage floor. "Let me," he said. His accent was Korean, but light, the accent of someone who had learned English early and lived with it long. He gathered her lipstick, her keys, her name badge. When he handed her the badge, his fingers paused for half a second on her name. Rose A. Whitfield, RN, pediatric ICU. He looked up at her. His eyes did something strange, a flicker, gone almost before she saw it. "You are a nurse," he said. It wasn't a question. "For 26 years. Pediatric." "Yes." He nodded slowly. He handed her the Rumi book last, and when she took it, he said, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." Rose blinked. That was the exact line she had underlined that morning. "I like Rumi too," he said, and he stood, and he offered her his hand to help her up. She took it. His palm was warm, steady. There was a small scar on the web of his thumb, silvery and old, in the shape of a crescent moon. She got in her car. She drove home. She did not think about him again until Thursday, when he was standing outside the hospital cafeteria at 7 in the morning, holding 2 cups of coffee. "One is for you," he said. "Cream, 1 sugar. I asked the woman at the counter what you usually get." Rose stared at him. "I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable," he said. "My name is Ji-hoon Seo. I own a real estate holding company in Fort Lee. I had a business meeting near the hospital and I saw you through the window. I would like, if you have 5 minutes, to buy you a proper breakfast. Not because of anything, just because you looked, on Tuesday, like someone who has not been treated to breakfast in a very long time." Rose almost laughed. She had not laughed in months, and the sound came out of her rusty and startled. "Mr. Seo," she said, "I'm a married woman." "I am not asking for a date." He said it gently. "I am asking to buy a nurse a cup of coffee at the hospital cafeteria she works in. If your husband would object to that, then your husband is a smaller man than I hope he is." Something in his phrasing, "smaller man than I hope he is," hooked into her the way a good sentence hooks. She looked at him, at his face, at the crescent scar on his thumb. She said, 15 minutes. They sat in the cafeteria under fluorescent lights. He asked her about the ICU, about the children she had lost and the children she had kept. He listened the way almost no one had listened to Rose in 15 years, the way her father used to listen, before he died at the wheel of the number 39 bus. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer solutions. He just leaned forward, elbows on the table, and let her talk. At one point, she mentioned that her sister had died 2 years ago. His eyes filled, actually filled. He didn't hide it. He said, "I am very sorry for your sister." She said, Thank you." He walked her back to the pediatric wing. At the door, he stopped and said, "May I come again, just for coffee, in this cafeteria, on days I have business nearby?" She said, "Why?" He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Because when I was a boy, someone was kind to me at a hospital when no one else was. I have spent my whole life trying to understand what she saw in me that made her kind. I don't know if I can ever repay that debt. But I would like to try to pay a little of it forward, to someone who looks like she could use a coffee." Rose felt something in her chest crack, just a hairline, not enough to break, enough to let air in. Over the next 18 days, Ji-hoon came to the cafeteria 6 times. He brought coffee. He brought Korean pears wrapped in soft paper. He brought her a leather-bound notebook when she mentioned she had stopped journaling because Yolanda had thrown out her old one. He never touched her. He never asked for her phone number. He never crossed a line. On the 18th day, she mentioned, offhand, tired, that her in-laws were hosting a dinner party for her husband's promotion, and she had 63 plates to prepare for. Ji-hoon Seo went very, very still. Then he asked, in a voice she had never heard from him before, "Whose promotion?" She told him. Marcus Whitfield, senior partner track at Blankenship, Ashford, and Cho. Ji-hoon's jaw moved once. He said, "I know that firm." He did not say how. He said, "Rose, I need to ask you something, and you may find it strange, but when your husband got this promotion, did he tell you anything about a new client his firm just landed?" She said, "A shipping consortium, Fort Lee, something CO Holdings." Ji-hoon closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, he said, "Do not tell your husband we have spoken. Not yet. There is something I need to check. And Rose, please, be careful in that house this week." He was gone before she could ask him why. For 3 days, Rose heard nothing. She worked her shifts. She washed her dishes. She lay awake next to Marcus in the master bedroom of the Bergen County house and listened to him snore and tried to understand why a Korean businessman had told her to be careful in her own home. On the 4th day, Ji-hoon called the hospital and had her paged to the front desk. He did not come inside. He asked her, through the receptionist, to please meet him in the visitor parking lot on her lunch break. She almost didn't go. She went. He was leaning against a black Escalade she had not noticed before, a car that had definitely not been in the parking garage the day her tote bag broke. He opened the passenger door for her. She hesitated. "We can sit in the coffee shop across the street if you prefer," he said. "I only want privacy for what I have to tell you, not intimacy." She got in. He drove them 2 blocks to a small Korean tea house with a private back room. He ordered barley tea. He waited until it came. Then he slid a folder across the table. "Before you open it," he said, "I need to tell you 3 things. First, I have lied to you by omission. My real estate holding company is real, but it is not the whole of what I do. My family has been involved for 4 generations in what people euphemistically call transnational logistics, in Seoul, in Los Angeles, and here. I am the head of that family. I have been since I was 29 years old." Rose's hand tightened on the teacup. "Second," Ji-hoon said, "I did not find you by accident in that parking garage. I have known who you were for 22 years. I have watched from a great distance, because I did not want to interrupt a life that seemed, from the outside, to be a happy one. When I saw you 3 weeks ago through the window of a client's office across from the hospital, I understood that your life is not what I thought it was, and I came to see for myself." She stared at him. "Third," he said, and his voice cracked for the 2nd time in their acquaintance, "I am the boy you fed bibimbap in room 411 of St. Joseph's Hospital in Newark in the summer of 2004. My uncle, the man who never visited, was the person who shot me. He shot me because I had refused to shoot someone else. I was 14. You gave me $20 and an address, and I used both. Your mother's church took me in for 3 weeks. A pastor named Reverend Amos put me on a Greyhound to Los Angeles, where a cousin of my mother's took me in. I built a life. I built an empire. And every year on the 4th of July, the day I was discharged from that hospital, I light a candle for a nurse named Rose, whose last name I never learned, because I could not read your English name badge, and I could not risk asking." Rose could not speak. Ji-hoon slid the folder toward her. "That is what I came to tell you in a coffee shop. This," he tapped the folder, "is why I told you to be careful in your home." She opened it. Financial records, bank statements, corporate filings, wire transfers. A photograph of Marcus meeting with a man Rose did not recognize in a hotel bar in Fort Lee. "Your husband's firm," Ji-hoon said quietly, "was hired 8 months ago by a Korean shipping company that fronts for a rival family. A family that has been trying to move into my territory in the Northeast for a decade. Your husband is not their accountant. He is their money launderer. He has moved $4.2 million for them through shell corporations in the last 8 months. He has done it through accounts that are, on paper, joint accounts, yours and his." Rose's teacup rattled against the saucer. "He has been using your name," Ji-hoon said, "your nursing license, your social security number, your credit. If federal investigators, and they are coming, Rose, they are coming within weeks, trace those accounts, you will go to prison for the rest of your life. He has made you the fall guy, deliberately, from the beginning." Rose stared at the photograph of her husband smiling at a stranger. "Why?" she whispered. "Are you telling me this?" Ji-hoon Seo, the boy she had fed with a plastic hospital spoon, the man she had not recognized in a parking garage, looked at her the way her father used to look at her when she was small and afraid. "Because 22 years ago you saved my life," he said, "and this week, Mama Rose, I intend to save yours." She began to cry for the first time in a decade. They sat in the tea house for 2 more hours. Ji-hoon did not touch her. He passed her a linen handkerchief and let her cry, and when she was finished he ordered fresh tea and gave her a small bowl of rice porridge with pickled radish, because she had said she hadn't eaten breakfast. Then he said, "I am not going to tell you what to do." Rose looked up. "Everything in that folder," he said, "is yours. I have made you 3 copies. I will help you get them to the right people. I have a lawyer in Newark, Adese Okafor, who has spent 30 years building cases against exactly the kind of financial abuse your husband has committed. She is a friend of mine. She will represent you at a rate you can afford, which is nothing. But Rose, you have to be the one who walks into her office. I cannot carry you through that door. If I carry you, you will never learn to walk." Rose said, "I don't know if I can." "I know." "He'll destroy me. Yolanda will destroy me. They'll say I'm crazy. They'll say I'm—" She searched for the word. "Ungrateful." Ji-hoon almost smiled. It was a small, sad, knowing smile. "Mama Rose," he said, and the name landed on her like a hand on a bruise. "Grateful is what they call women who have stopped asking for what they deserve. You have been grateful for 15 years. It has bought you nothing but a sink full of other people's dishes." She wiped her face. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "In exchange?" He looked at her for a long moment. She saw the boy in him then briefly, the 14-year-old with a bullet in his belly, and no English words for what had happened to him. "Nothing," he said. "That is not how this works. If I ask you for something, then what I did for you becomes a transaction, and what you did for me becomes a transaction, and the whole thing, everything that has passed between us, collapses into a business deal. I will not do that to you, and I will not do it to the memory of the woman you were when you handed me $20 and told me anywhere but here." He paused. "What I will tell you," he said, "is this. If you choose to walk into Adese Okafor's office, I will make sure you are safe while you do it. I have people. Those people will be near you, but not on you. You will not see them unless you need to. Your husband will not hurt you. His family will not hurt you. If they try to intimidate you into silence, I will know about it before they finish the sentence. That is not a favor. That is a floor. That is the least any decent human being should do for another. But everything above that floor, the paperwork, the testimony, the courage, That has to come from you." Rose was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "There's a risk. Yes. To you, if I do this. Your family, your enemies. You just walked into a public tea house with a black American nurse who is married to a man who works for people who want to kill you. That's not nothing." Ji-hoon nodded slowly. He seemed pleased that she had thought of it. "It is not nothing," he said. "But I am not 14 years old anymore, Rose. I am not a boy hiding in a hospital bed. My father is dead. My uncle is dead. For a long time now, and by my hand, in a way that was legal enough to survive scrutiny. My enemies know my name. They have known it for 2 decades. If they wanted to move against me for meeting a nurse for tea, they would have moved already. They will not touch you because you are with me. That, too, is a floor." Rose looked at her hands, the cracked skin, the wedding ring that no longer fit. "If I do this," she said slowly, "I lose everything. The house, the marriage, 14 years. You will lose a house you paid for that was never yours. A marriage that has already ended, in every way that matters, years ago. And 14 years you cannot get back, whether you stay or go. The only question is whether you spend the next 14 the same way." She looked up at him. "Mama Rose," Ji-hoon said quietly, "you are 48. My mother, when she died, was 49. She used to say that a woman's second half is the one she chooses. Her first half is chosen for her. Please, choose your second half." Rose closed her eyes. She thought of her mother, Comfort, braiding her hair. "You are somebody's answered prayer, baby." She thought of her sister, Denise Ray, dying in Elizabeth. She thought of the cast-iron skillet Yolanda had thrown away. She thought of the 63 plates. She opened her eyes. "I'll go see a Daisy Okafor," she said. "Tomorrow morning, before my shift." Ji-hoon exhaled slowly. It was the exhale of a man who had been holding his breath for 22 years. "Then tomorrow morning," he said, "you begin." He walked her back to her car. Before she got in, she stopped and looked at him. "Ji-hoon?" she said. It was the first time she had used his name. "Yes." "That night, in the hospital, do you remember what you said to me? On the 11th morning, before you left?" He looked away for a moment. "I said Iyama," he said. "It means mother in Korean. I did not have the English for what you had been to me, so I said the only word I had." "I thought you were saying you were hungry." He laughed. It was the first laugh she had heard from him. It sounded like something rusted opening. "No, Mama Rose," he said. "I was saying thank you." A Daisy Okafor's office was on the 4th floor of a walk-up on Broad Street in Newark, 4 blocks from the church Rose had been married in. Adaze was 71 years old, 5 feet tall, and wore an Ankara head wrap so bright it hurt to look at directly. She had emigrated from Lagos in 1976 and had put 4 children through college on the money she made suing bad husbands, bad bosses, and bad banks. She looked at Rose's folder for 11 minutes without speaking. Then she looked up and said, "Baby, this man has tried to bury you." Rose said, "I know." "You understand," Adaze said carefully, "that if we file for divorce and forensic accounting simultaneously, and we petition the court for immediate asset freeze, your husband will know within 24 hours. His family will know. His firm will know. He will retaliate. He will call you crazy. He will empty accounts he still has access to. He may try to have you fired. He may, if he is truly desperate, try to have you committed. I understand. You cannot go back to that house tonight." "I know. Do you have somewhere?" Rose hesitated. Adaze watched her face. "I see," Adaze said. "That is fine. I don't need to know. I only need to know that you are not sleeping in that house. If you sleep in that house, Rose, one of 2 things will happen. Either you will lose your nerve, or he will hurt you. There is no third possibility. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Sign here, and here, and here." Rose signed for 45 minutes. Financial disclosures, powers of attorney. A criminal complaint naming Marcus Whitfield as the primary actor in a wire fraud scheme, and requesting that all joint accounts be flagged for federal review. Adaise also filed, on Rose's behalf, an emergency ex parte motion for exclusive occupancy of the Bergen County house, a legal move Adaise explained with the same expression a general uses to explain a flanking maneuver. "He owns the house on paper," Adaise said, "because of course he does. But you can prove the down payment came from your mother's estate. You can prove you have paid the mortgage for 14 years. The judge will not evict him tonight, but the judge will freeze the property. He will not be able to sell it, borrow against it, or transfer it. And in 6 weeks, we will get you into a courtroom where he will have to explain, on record, why every large deposit in your joint accounts came from a shell corporation registered in Delaware." Rose walked out of that office at 11 in the morning. She drove to the hospital. She worked a full shift, because her patients did not deserve to suffer for her marriage, and because Adaise had told her to behave normally until the papers were served at 5 p.m. At 4:45, she clocked out. At 4:50, her phone began to ring. Marcus, Yolanda, Denise. Marcus again. Marcus, Marcus, Marcus. She did not answer. At 5:20, she pulled into the parking lot of a small extended-stay hotel in Elizabeth that Adaise had booked for her under the name Rose Boteng, her maiden name, which Marcus had never bothered to learn how to spell. There was a man in the lobby, Korean, late 20s. He nodded to her once and did not speak. She understood, without being told, that he would be there all night. She went up to room 211 and closed the door and sat down on the bed. Her phone rang again. Marcus. She stared at it. Then, for the first time in 14 years, she pressed the little red button and sent her husband to voicemail. The phone rang again. And again. And again. By 8 p.m., she had 41 missed calls, 23 voicemails, and a text from Yolanda that read, "You ungrateful backwoods heifer. Come home and clean this up before we press charges." Rose laughed. It came out of her raw and shaking. She screenshotted the text and sent it to Adaise. Adaise sent back one word: evidence. At 9 p.m., there was a soft knock on the door. Rose looked through the peephole. It was Ji-hoon. She let him in. He did not sit down. He was carrying a paper bag from a Korean grocery store. "I brought you food," he said. "I will not stay. I only wanted to make sure you had eaten today. My mother used to say that a woman fighting a war on an empty stomach loses, not because she is weak, because the men she is fighting have eaten." Rose took the bag. "Ji-hoon," she said. "Yes, I did it." He looked at her. "I know," he said quietly. "I have known since 11 o'clock this morning. I have been proud of you all day." Rose sat down on the edge of the bed. "I don't know what happens next," she said. "You eat," he said. "You sleep. Tomorrow Adaise will call. Tomorrow everything will get harder before it gets easier. That is the shape of it. But you have done the first thing, Rose. Everything else is only continuation." He turned to leave. At the door, he paused. "Mama Rose," he said without turning around, "I would like to tell you one more thing. I will not visit you here again. Not because I do not want to. Because you should not do this next part while a man is showing up at your hotel with dinner. You should do this next part alone, so that when it is done, you know that you did it. Do you understand?" She said, "Yes." "Good. Adaise has my number. If you need it, use it. If you do not need it, I will see you when this is over." He left. Rose sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, holding a paper bag of Korean food and staring at a phone full of hate. If this story is landing on you the way I hope it is, if you have ever sat in a hotel room somewhere and felt the whole floor of your life fall out from under you, do me a favor right now. Drop a comment and tell me one word that describes the moment you decided you had had enough. Just one word. I want to read every single one of them. Now hit that like button, and let's finish this. Rose opened the paper bag. Inside was a thermos of hot bone broth, 3 pieces of Korean pear, a small container of rice, and a card. On the card, in careful handwriting, someone had written, You are somebody's answered prayer. Do not forget. She sat down on the bed and she wept, not from despair this time, from being seen. 6 weeks became 5 months. The federal investigation Ji-hoon had warned about arrived on a Tuesday, exactly as he had predicted, in the form of 2 FBI agents who showed up at Blankenship, Ashford, and Cho with a subpoena for Marcus Whitfield's client files. Marcus, arrogant to the last, told them he had done nothing wrong. He offered them coffee. He walked them into a conference room. He talked for 2 hours without a lawyer present, because he believed, the way Marcus had always believed, that he was the smartest man in any room he walked into. He was not. By the end of the 2nd hour, Marcus had contradicted himself 11 times, and the senior agent had a very clear picture of who had actually signed the wire transfers, and it was not Rose. Rose had, on Adaise's advice, already sat for 2 voluntary interviews. She had brought bank statements dating back 6 years. She had brought her nursing schedule for the 8 months in question, showing that she had worked 172 overnight shifts during periods when large transfers had been initiated from an IP address that resolved to the Bergen County house. Marcus had used her name. He had used her social security number. He had done it while she was at the hospital saving other people's children. The FBI arrested him on a Friday morning. Rose was at work. She got the call from Adaise, who said, in a voice like a woman announcing the weather, "Baby, it is done. He is in custody." Rose walked to the pediatric ICU bathroom. She locked the stall. She sat down on the toilet lid with her hands over her face, and she did not cry. She just breathed, in and out, for 11 minutes. When she came out, she washed her hands, fixed her ponytail, and went back to work. 2 of her nurses noticed something was different. Neither of them asked. Rose loved them for it. The divorce hearing came 3 weeks later. Rose walked into the Bergen County courthouse in a navy suit Adaise had picked out for her, with her hair in the same twist-out her mother used to give her as a child. Marcus was there. So were Yolanda and Denise in the 3rd row of the gallery, both of them dressed in black like they were mourning something. Marcus's court-appointed lawyer, his firm had dropped him the day after his arrest, along with his savings, argued that Rose had known everything, had participated, had benefited. He argued that she was a scorned wife, weaponizing her nursing license for sympathy. Adaise rose to cross-examine Marcus. She was 5 feet tall. She looked, standing next to Marcus's 6'2" frame, like a candle next to a lamppost. She destroyed him in 47 minutes. She walked him through every wire transfer, every date, every IP address. She produced Rose's hospital time cards. She produced the surveillance footage from the Bergen County house showing Marcus at his home office at 3 in the morning, while Rose was scrubbing in for surgery on a preemie. She produced text messages from Marcus to his mother that read, "Ma, if this ever falls apart, Rose's name is on everything. We are good." Yolanda screamed, "That's private," from the gallery. The judge threatened to remove her. She sat down. At the end of Adaise's cross-examination, the judge, a Puerto Rican woman named Isabella Vega, 63 years old, who had been on the bench for 29 years, looked at Marcus for a long moment. Then she looked at Rose. Then she said, "Mrs. Whitfield, or should I call you Miss Botang?" Rose stood. "Botang, Your Honor, please." Judge Vega nodded once. "Miss Botang," she said, "I've been doing this a long time. I have seen a lot of men try to bury their wives inside their own crimes. I want you to know that I see you. I want you to know that the court sees you. And I want you to know that this bench will not permit what your husband tried to do to you to stand." She awarded Rose the Bergen County house outright. She awarded her 50% of Marcus's remaining assets, which, after federal seizure, amounted to $68,000, but was 50%. She restored Rose's maiden name. And she ordered Marcus to pay Rose's legal fees, which Adaise had waived, and which Rose asked to have redirected to a domestic violence shelter in Newark. Marcus was sentenced 8 weeks later to 11 years in federal prison. As Rose walked out of the courthouse that afternoon, Yolanda blocked her path on the steps. "You destroyed my son," Yolanda hissed. Rose stopped. She looked at the woman who had thrown out her mother's skillet. She did not raise her voice. "Yolanda," she said quietly, "your son destroyed himself. I just stopped covering for him. And you know what? I am done covering for you, too. Get off my steps." She walked past her. She did not look back. 2 months later, Marcus called her from prison. It was a Sunday evening in April. Rose was in the Bergen County house, her house now, legally and cleanly, repainting Yolanda's old bedroom a color called soft dawn that she had picked out with no one's permission. Her phone rang. The number was blocked. She almost didn't answer. She did. "Rose," Marcus said. His voice was smaller than she had ever heard it. "Rose, please don't hang up." She sat down on the drop cloth. She said nothing. "Rose, baby, I've had a lot of time to think, and I know I hurt you. I know I did things I shouldn't have done. But you and I, Rose, we had 14 years. That's not nothing. That has to mean something." She said nothing. "I need you to talk to my lawyer," he said. "There's a motion for reduced sentencing. If you would just write a letter to the judge, say we're reconciling, say you forgive me, it would come down to 8 years, maybe 7. Rose, please, I'm your husband." Rose looked at the paint roller in her hand. She said, "Marcus." "Yes, baby." "Do you remember my sister's funeral?" Silence. "Do you remember," Rose said, "that I asked you to come with me to Elizabeth for the service? And you said you had a client dinner? And I sat in the front pew of a funeral home alone, and I buried my only sister without a single member of my husband's family beside me? Do you remember that? Rose, do you remember that when I came home that night, Yolanda had thrown my mother's cast-iron skillet in the trash, and you said, 'Ma didn't mean anything by it, Rose, don't start.' Rose, that was a long time ago. It was 3 years ago. That was 3 years ago, Marcus." He said nothing. "You are asking me," Rose said, "to write a letter to a judge saying that I forgive you. But you have never, one time, in 14 years, said the words, 'I am sorry' to me. Not for your mother, not for your sister, not for the money, not for the years, not for using my name on documents I never signed, not for any of it. And now, because a judge might give you 3 fewer years, you want my forgiveness in writing." He said, "Rose, I love you." Rose closed her eyes. "I don't think you know what that word means," she said quietly. "I don't think you ever did. And I am not going to spend one more sentence of my life trying to teach it to you. Rose, I forgive you, Marcus. I forgive you because I have to, for me, so that I can sleep at night. But I will not write that letter. I will not visit. I will not take your calls again. When you get out in 11 years, I will be 60. I will have grandchildren by then, God willing, from children I do not have yet, and I intend to have a life so full of my own name that I will not remember yours. Do you understand me?" She heard him breathing. "Do you understand me, Marcus?" "Yes," he whispered. "Goodbye." She hung up. She sat on the drop cloth for a long time in Yolanda's old bedroom, with a paint roller in her lap and her heart beating steady and quiet in her chest. Then she stood up. She dipped the roller, and she painted over the last patch of Yolanda's old wallpaper, a hideous mauve floral pattern Yolanda had installed without asking, until the whole wall was soft dawn. When she was finished, she stepped back and looked at what she had made. For the first time in 15 years, she had a room in her own house that was not decorated by someone else. She sat down in the middle of the floor and she said, out loud, to no one, "Hi, Mama." She said it to Comfort. She said it to Denise Ray. She said it to herself. 9 months after the divorce, Hackensack Memorial promoted Rose to nurse manager of the pediatric ICU. It was not a favor. It was not because anyone felt sorry for her. She had earned it. 26 years earned it. And the way she had held the unit together during 2 staffing crises earned it. And the way the parents of her patients wrote letters about her earned it. The promotion came with a $40,000 raise, an office with a window, and a nameplate that read, "Rose A. Boateng, RN, MSN, nurse manager, pediatric intensive care. She had finished her master's degree at Rutgers 3 months earlier. She had done it in 18 months, working full-time, paying tuition out of the $68,000 from the divorce settlement. Ji-hoon had offered to pay. She had told him no. He had said, without argument, of course. The day she got the nameplate, she took a photo of it and sent it to 2 people, Adaze and Ji-hoon. Adaze wrote back, "My baby, my clever girl. Your mother is dancing." Ji-hoon wrote back, "Mama Rose. I've been waiting to call you doctor one day. Master's is a beautiful beginning." She laughed out loud at her desk. That evening, driving home to the Bergen County house, which she had begun the process of selling, because 6 bedrooms for one woman was a monument to a life she no longer wanted to live inside, she stopped at the grocery store and bought herself a bouquet of yellow chrysanthemums. She put them on the kitchen counter, next to a new cast-iron skillet. She had bought the skillet at a restaurant supply store in Newark, and she had seasoned it herself in her own oven over 3 careful evenings, following the same method her mother had used with the one Yolanda had thrown away. It was not the same skillet. It was a new one, hers. She stood in the kitchen, the same kitchen where she had washed 63 plates on the worst night of her life, and she cooked herself dinner, jollof rice, the way Comfort had taught her, grilled fish, fried plantains. She set one plate at the head of the table. She sat down. She said grace. She ate. She did not scroll her phone. She did not turn on the television. She sat at her own table in her own house, and she tasted her own food. And she thought about the woman she had been 6 weeks ago, 6 months ago, 6 years ago. She had lost 22 pounds during the divorce. She had gained back 14 of them by cooking her mother's recipes 3 nights a week and eating them at her own table. She was 145 pounds. She had gray at her temples that she had stopped dyeing. She had lines around her eyes from smiling with children in the ICU, and she had a scar on her left ring finger from where the wedding ring had left an indent she was proud to see fading. She was 49 years old. She was, for the first time in her adult life, entirely her own. That night she called her Aunt Beryl in Newark, Comfort's youngest sister, 78 years old and still sharp as a razor, and told her about the promotion. Aunt Beryl listened to the whole thing without interrupting. When Rose was done, Aunt Beryl said, "Baby, your mama always said you were the answered prayer. She used to worry you had forgotten. I told her, Comfort, that girl of yours has not forgotten. She has only laid it down. One day she will pick it up again, and when she does, watch out." Rose said, "I picked it up, Aunt Beryl." Aunt Beryl said, "I know, baby. I can hear it in your voice. Welcome home." Rose did not see Ji-hoon Seo for 11 months. He had told her that night in the extended stay hotel that he would see her when it was over, and he had meant it, the way he meant everything he said. He wrote to her sometimes, short notes, a book of poems by a Korean woman named Kim Hee-soon, a Christmas card that said only Mama Rose, "Merry Christmas. I hope this year you cook for yourself." She wrote back, short notes too. She told him about Adaisy's grandchildren, about the master's degree, about the yellow chrysanthemums. She did not tell him she thought about him almost every day. He did not tell her he thought about her either, but he did. The 11th month was August. Rose had just closed on the Bergen County house, sold to a young Nigerian couple with 3 children, for $100,000 more than she had paid Marcus's family friend for it 14 years ago, and had bought a small 3-bedroom craftsman in Montclair, painted the color of soft dawn, with a garden in the back big enough for tomatoes and okra. On a Saturday, she invited Ji-hoon to lunch, on her porch, in her house, for the first time. He arrived at noon. He brought a small tree in a ceramic pot, a young persimmon with a note that said, "These grow in Korea and in New Jersey. Plant it wherever you feel most yourself." She had cooked jollof rice, grilled mackerel, kimchi. She had made herself from a recipe she had gotten from a Korean nurse at the hospital. He tasted the kimchi and closed his eyes for a moment. "Who taught you?" he said. "Hyunjin in nephrology. She said mine was passable." He laughed. "Passable from Hyunjin is an award." They ate on the porch. They talked for 4 hours. about her masters, about his mother who had died young, about the shape of a life after you have set fire to the version of it that was killing you. At one point, Rose said carefully, "Ji-hoon, what you do for a living?" He nodded slowly. He had been waiting for the question. "I am transitioning out," he said. "I have been for 3 years. It is a slow process. My family businesses are being converted, one at a time, into legitimate operations. Real estate, a restaurant group, a scholarship foundation for Korean American students in New Jersey. Everything I built the wrong way is being rebuilt the right way. It will take another 10 years at least, maybe 15. But by the time I am 60, I will be a real estate developer with a foundation, and nothing else. That is my only remaining ambition." Rose said, "That's a lot to ask of one lifetime." "My mother," Ji-hoon said, "used to say that a man's true worth is measured by what he undoes, not what he builds, what he undoes. I have a lot to undo." Rose looked at him for a long time. She said, "I am not ready for anything." He nodded. "I know," he said. "I am not asking for anything." "But I would like—" She stopped, started again. "I would like to keep having lunches, sometimes, on this porch, and in restaurants, and I would like, if you would like, to teach me a little more Korean. Because I have forgotten most of the 6 words I learned at 19, and I have decided, in my second half, that I would like to be a woman who speaks more than one language." Ji-hoon smiled. He said, "Annyeonghaseyo, Mama Rose." She said, "Annyeong, annyeonghaseyo, annyeonghaseyo." "Very good. That means hello, but literally it means are you at peace?" Rose sat back in her chair. She looked out over her garden, over the tomato plants, over the young persimmon in its ceramic pot waiting to be planted. "Yes," she said, "I am." He stayed until the sun went down. He did not touch her. He did not kiss her. He did not ask to. At the door, before he left, he said, "Rose, thank you for the meal, for your friendship, for the honor of being allowed to eat at your table." She said, "Come back next Saturday." He said, "Yes, and every Saturday if you will have me. And when you are ready, and only when you are ready, we will see what these Saturdays become." She nodded. She watched him walk down her front path to his car. No Escalade this time, a simple gray sedan. He drove himself. She closed her door. She leaned against it. She smiled. She did not know yet what she and Ji-hoon Seo would become. She only knew that whatever it was, she would enter it whole, not as a woman looking to be rescued, but as a woman who had already rescued herself and was choosing freely the company of a man who had chosen freely to become someone worth keeping company with. That was enough. For now, that was more than enough. 2 years after Ji-hoon Seo walked through her in-laws' front door, Rose Boteng stood in the front row of a small ceremony at a scholarship foundation in Fort Lee, watching a 19-year-old Korean-American girl from Newark accept a check for full tuition to Rutgers School of Nursing. The scholarship was called the Comfort Boteng Award. Rose had named it herself. She sat on the board. She had chosen the recipient personally. And the girl, who did not know Rose's story, only that some kind stranger had believed she could be a nurse, cried on the stage in a way that made Rose's chest ache in the good way. Ji-hoon stood beside her, not touching, just there. Because here is the theme, and it is the whole of the theme, and if you take one thing from this story, I hope it is this. Love is not something you earn by being useful. Love is something you receive by being seen. And if you spend your whole life making yourself small enough to be tolerated by the wrong people, you will never have the strength to stand tall enough to be loved by the right ones. Rose Whitfield believed the lie for 29 years. She washed the plates. She paid the tuitions. She buried her sister alone. She let a family throw out her mother's skillet. And when a stranger she had once fed with a plastic hospital spoon walked through her front door and called her Mama Rose, she remembered, in one lightning strike of recognition, that she had once been the kind of woman who fed strangers, who gave $20, who whispered anywhere but here. That woman had not died. She had only been buried under 63 plates. And on the day she dug herself out, she got everything back. Her name, her mother's memory, her table, her language, her worth. She did not get a fairy tale. She got something better. She got herself back. If this story moved you, if you saw yourself in any part of Rose, in the sink, in the courthouse, in the kitchen of the house you finally made your own, do 3 things for me before you go. Comment the word Mama Rose if you have ever been the one holding a family together while it forgot to hold you back. Share this video with one woman in your life who is still washing dishes at somebody else's table. And subscribe, because next week we are telling another story about another woman who did not get a fairy tale either. She got herself back. That's the ending. That's always been the ending. Go get yours.